Imagine a night so quiet that even the insects refuse to sing, when the stars above a forgotten Kansas town flicker like they're blinking out of existence. Imagine a flash so bright it burns the horizon, without sound, without heat, leaving behind a crater that breathes. In that moment, as the world celebrated the end of war, something ancient awoke beneath the soil. It did not come from above, nor below. It came from a place in between. And it has been waiting ever since. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. May you receive great rewards for subscribe, like, comment, and share this story. Now, let's continue with the story. August 6, 1945. The town of Haviland, Kansas, slept under the cool hush of midnight. The war overseas had turned distant, like a radio fading into static. People said prayers, turned off oil lamps, and expected tomorrow to be just like today. But then the sky lit up like a sun being born. No sound, no rumble, just light, searing white, and impossibly contained within a small corner of Albert Finch's wheat field. The animals screamed. Electrical devices surged and died. A circular shadow spread across the fields like a growing bruise. Albert saw it from his porch. The horizon flashed, then went dark. He walked to the edge of his land and found a smoldering depression in the earth where nothing should have been. Soil had fused into glass. The wheat had collapsed in perfect radial symmetry, as if pressed down from the inside out. Then came the trucks. By dawn, 10 unmarked vehicles rolled into town. No insignias, no plates. The men wore army uniforms but didn't speak like soldiers. They set up barriers around the crater, sealed it in tarpaulin, and declared the land classified under an emergency order that no one in Haviland had ever heard of. Albert was told to pack up and leave. He never returned. In the decades that followed, the incident faded into memory. The nation turned its eyes toward Hiroshima. The world changed, and Haviland was forgotten, except by those who remained. Now, in the present day, Dr. Evelyn Roarke stepped out of a rental car onto the dusty backroads of Kiowa County. A physicist once dismissed as a crank by the academic elite, she had come here chasing a shadow, a magnetic anomaly recorded by Cold War-era reconnaissance satellites. Something under the ground pulsed, faint but constant, like the ticking of an ancient clock. She stood at the edge of a long-abandoned field surrounded by barbed wire and faded signs that read, "No trespassing. Federal property." Her equipment, cobbled together from scavenged DARPA prototypes and civilian instruments, pinged with increasing frequency as she approached what locals still called the quiet zone. Old farmers watched her from their porches, shaking their heads. Some remembered their fathers speaking of that night. The flash, the crater, and the machines that vanished underground. Evelyn set up her scanner and dropped a probe into the dry earth. Within seconds, it returned data that made her stomach drop. There was metal beneath her feet, deep, woven through with an isotope not found in any terrestrial deposit. She had seen this pattern once before, in the vitrified remains of an experimental subreactor deep beneath Antarctica, where even time had started to behave irregularly. A shape began to emerge on her readout. Not a bomb, not a ship. Something circular, layered, breathing. She heard it then, not through her ears, but inside her bones. A deep frequency too low to be captured by microphones. It wasn't sound. It was thought, a pulse of awareness, as if something vast and patient was waking from hibernation. That night, her campsite lights flickered. The wheat field around her moved, though the air was still. And beneath her tent, she felt a heartbeat. A heartbeat in the earth. The morning after the silent heartbeat, Evelyn Roarke sat inside her tent staring at the sensor logs. There had been no wind, no seismic activity, no external interference. Yet her equipment recorded a rhythmic vibration, 12-second intervals, lasting 6 full minutes before vanishing as quickly as it came. She opened a fresh file and typed 3 words into the subject line: subterranean conscious oscillation. Outside, the sky was iron gray, and the wheat field looked ordinary. But Evelyn's instruments told a different story. The magnetic field around the anomaly had shifted, just slightly, but in a structured pattern. It wasn't natural. It was intentional. She stood and walked to the crater site. The old fencing was rusted, but intact. Signs hung from posts, weathered by decades of Kansas storms. Beyond it, the earth was marked by decades of abandonment. Grass grew through the cracks of concrete platforms, metal struts stuck out like broken ribs. Evelyn's boots crunched on gravel as she stepped over the wire. The soil within the perimeter felt wrong. Denser. The kind of density you'd find in compacted ash or heat-fused regolith. She crouched and scraped her gloved fingers across it. Beneath the top layer, the dirt was faintly warm. Still active. She set up a ground-penetrating radar drone and watched as it began scanning downward. The first layers were unremarkable: soil, old construction debris. But then it found something. A dome, just under 60 meters below, metallic, circular. Its outer surface patterned with grooves too regular to be natural erosion. Evelyn zoomed in. The grooves weren't damage. They were symbols. She froze. The patterns were geometric, logarithmic spirals, hexagonal lattices, and in the center, a perfect Mandelbrot set etched into the metal like it had been grown instead of carved. Mathematical language. Recursive. Alive. That night, Evelyn visited the local diner for coffee and silence. But silence was hard to find in a town where memories never died. "You're with the government?" asked a man at the counter. He wore a dusty cap and spoke without turning his head. "No," Evelyn replied cautiously. "I'm with no one." The man chuckled, low and dry. "That's worse. At least the government knew what to fear." Evelyn turned slightly. "You were here. In 45. He nodded. "I was 11. Watched it from the windmill tower." The sky flashed white. Not loud, not hot, just bright. Like God blinked. He paused. Then the men came. Sealed the crater. Built something deep under it. Stayed for 5 years. Then they vanished. Left nothing behind but concrete bones and buzzing ground. "What was it?" she asked. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Whatever it is, it's still dreamin'. And some dreams aren't meant to wake." Evelyn left the diner before dusk. The roads were silent. Her tent glowed faintly in the distance, lit from within by the low hum of equipment still running diagnostics. But something was off. Her wind sensor was spinning, even though there was no wind. Her Geiger counter clicked softly, faster than before. And her drone feed, once static, now displayed a faint glow coming from beneath the ground. Pulsing. Thump, thump, thump. She pulled up the live waveform. The pulses had changed. They were no longer just rhythmic, they were structured. The intervals between beats formed a Fibonacci sequence. That night, her dreams were not her own. She saw symbols burned into clouds. She heard voices speaking numbers in unison. She stood on the edge of a glass ocean beneath a sky of liquid light, and something, some presence, stood beside her, whispering in a language that bypassed words and seared straight into thought. She awoke at 2:47 a.m. to the sound of metal groaning underground. And a voice, real this time, not in her mind, emanating from her field radio. "Evelyn Roarke. Do not dig further." No signal registered on the receiver. No transmission. Just the voice, then silence. She stared at the radio. And for the first time in her life, Dr. Evelyn Roarke felt fear that wasn't rooted in science. It was something older, deeper, something she had no name for. Dawn broke like a bruise across the horizon. Cold light spread over the Kansas prairie as Evelyn packed her gear in silence. Her breath fogged in the early chill, but the soil beneath her boots still radiated a faint, unnatural warmth. The voice on the radio haunted her. It hadn't spoken again. No repeat message, no trace in the logs. But the fact remained, it knew her name. Not just that she was there. It knew her. She powered up her seismic array and drilled a narrow test bore directly above the anomaly. The probe descended smoothly until it struck something solid at exactly 63 meters. Far too shallow for natural bedrock. She retrieved the core sample. It was fused silica. Not just glass, structured glass, as if molded under pressure in microgravity. The layer was 1 centimeter thick and impossibly clear. Beneath it, the drill had retrieved nothing. The bit had stopped, not because of resistance, but because it had reached a cavity. A void. Evelyn placed the core under magnification. At first glance, it was perfect. But then she saw them, internal microfractures running along unnatural angles, forming repeating sequences of numbers that didn't belong. She enhanced the image. The sequences formed a recursive loop, resolving into what looked like a digital waveform encoded directly into the material. Glass that held memory. She took a breath and played the waveform through her sonic processor. The result wasn't music, or code, or even speech. It was laughter. Human. Male. Brief, low, and unmistakably real. Evelyn recoiled from her terminal. She hadn't told anyone she was here. Her communications were offline. This site had been abandoned since 1950. Yet somehow, human laughter, archived and stored, had been waiting for her in fused mineral glass sealed 60 meters underground. She returned to her drone station and began a full-spectrum scan of the dome. The drone's sensors lit up with interference. Below the dome, something had changed. A shape had appeared. A tunnel. Circular. Perfect. Leading away from the dome. Buried deep beneath the Kansas wheat field like a root stretching into unseen soil. Evelyn adjusted the scan parameters. The interference increased. Her equipment began to fail one by one. GPS dropout, magnetic compass spinning uncontrollably, batteries discharging in seconds. The closer she got to the dome, the more reality itself began to bend. She backed away. The air tasted metallic. Her fingertips tingled. Later that evening, Evelyn sat in her tent reviewing satellite photos she had downloaded before arriving. A shadow passed across one of them. Not a natural one, a circular bloom of distortion, like heat rippling across the atmosphere. Dated August 6, 1945. The exact time of the silent flash. She enlarged the image. A faint silhouette showed beneath the distortion, a structure. Not a crater. A construct. Circular, with long spindled arms like antennae stretching outward into invisible space. But there were no buildings there now. Just earth and wheat and forgotten warnings. She needed access to government archives. Files sealed by the Department of Energy and Strategic Threat Assessment during the Cold War. But there was one person who might know more. She called him that night. Colonel Robert Trent. Retired. 20 years military intelligence. You were in Kiowa County in '63. You led a recovery unit. A pause. Then his voice, dry and tired. You're the one poking the hornet's nest. What did you find under that field? He didn't answer. I've got fusion-patterned glass with encoded audio, she continued. A buried structure with artificial geometry. A tunnel leading away from a dome. And I've got a voice on my radio warning me not to dig. Trent finally spoke. We weren't the first ones there. The facility beneath the field predates the war. It wasn't built. It was uncovered. And we were told to seal it. Not study it. Seal what? A machine, Trent said. But not one of ours. And not from any other country either. Something old. And waiting. He hung up. Evelyn sat in silence as the prairie wind picked up outside. Dust swirled against the sides of her tent. The field moaned with something more than wind. And somewhere below, in the glass and metal layers buried beneath Kansas wheat, a tunnel opened just slightly wider. Inviting. The following morning brought no sunrise, only a dull yellow glow filtering through thick cloud cover. The air smelled of ozone, and Evelyn's instruments registered unusual electrical activity in the atmosphere. She knelt at the borehole and lowered a new fiber-optic camera, this time reinforced with braided shielding. The line fed steadily into the earth, past layers of fused mineral, then into blackness. 63 meters down, the lens emerged into a space the light couldn't fully explain. The tunnel was not carved. It was formed, its walls smooth and metallic, yet lined with filaments that shimmered like liquid veins. The air pressure was stable, the temperature unnaturally consistent, and along the walls, faint pulses of light moved in perfect intervals, like the respiration of a sleeping machine. The camera's microphone began to pick up low frequencies. Rhythmic. Intentional. Evelyn enhanced the audio stream and froze. The pulses matched human speech cadence. Not words. Not language. But the tempo of conversation. Someone, or something, was talking. Not in a language of symbols, but in breath and rhythm. She increased the volume, pressing her headset tight. Thump. Thump. Pause. Thump thump. Pause. Thump. Morse. She opened a translator and began decoding. D. O. W. N. S. T. A. Y. D. O. W. N. S. A. F. E. Her breath caught in her throat. Stay down. Safe. She stared at the feed, the pale illumination flowing along the tunnel like blood through an artery. Somewhere beneath this quiet field, a machine, or an organism, was talking. Not warning, not threatening, communicating, and offering protection. She remembered Trent's words. We weren't the first. Evelyn sent the camera further. 100 meters down, the tunnel opened into a chamber, and what the lens revealed made her recoil. Dozens of figures, humanoid silhouettes, suspended in translucent cocoons. Floating. Still. Preserved in a dim blue glow that pulsed gently with the tunnel's rhythm. Men and women in uniforms from different eras. A Cold War-era radiation suit. A 1940s jumpsuit. Even a NASA patch from an older generation of astronauts. She scanned their faces. They weren't dead. Their chests moved slowly. Eyes closed. Peaceful. Preserved. Stored. Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears. Were these the missing personnel? Scientists, soldiers, observers who had come too close and disappeared? They weren't abducted. They had been saved. Or taken. Or both. The camera moved, almost on its own, shifting toward the far end of the chamber. A pedestal. Metallic. Smooth. Pulsing. And on it, a human handprint carved into the surface. Larger than her own. Older. Weathered. Next to it, a panel blinked with symbols that made no linguistic sense, but felt like meaning. She tried to focus on the image, but the camera flickered. Static overtook the feed. And then the voice returned. But not through her headset. Inside her head. Not sound. Not hallucination. Invitation. Come. Alone. Her vision blurred. Her mouth went dry. She yanked the headset off and staggered away from the equipment. Night fell quickly, as if something had pulled the sun below the horizon with unnatural speed. That evening, Evelyn received a secure email. No sender. No address. Just a file. A video feed from an old reconnaissance drone. Black and white. Labeled Project Haviland. June 17, 1951. The drone descended through the wheat field, past the same tunnel she had just explored, and into the same chamber. The video ended with an image of a man standing before the pedestal. General Walter V. Cross. Officially declared missing in action during the Korean War. He raised his hand. Placed it on the panel. The feed cut out. No one had seen him since. Evelyn shut the laptop and looked out across the wheat. The wind was still. The world seemed to hold its breath. She now knew the truth. The anomaly beneath Haviland was not a weapon or a remnant of war. It was a gateway, and someone had built it long before humans had the words to describe it. At first light, Evelyn stood alone at the edge of the borehole, dressed in insulated gear, her equipment strapped tightly to her body. A harness lowered her slowly through the artificial tunnel, 60 meters down into the unknown. The descent was silent. The deeper she went, the less she heard. Not just ambient noise, but the absence of herself. Her heartbeat faded in her ears. The rustle of her clothes disappeared. Even her own breath seemed to dampen. Only the soft glow of the tunnel's filaments and the vibration beneath her boots remained. At the bottom, her boots touched solid surface. The chamber was exactly as the drone had shown. Vast, arched like the inside of a cathedral carved from liquid metal and frozen in motion. The air was breathable but sterile, with a faint scent like ionized copper. Evelyn stepped forward, her boots echoing faintly. To her left, the cocoons shimmered in blue light. Dozens of them. The preserved forms within did not react. Their vitals still fluttered on her scanner, alive, suspended in some state between sleep and stasis. She passed a woman wearing a patch that read USMC, 1972. Her hair floated around her face like strands underwater. Next to her, a man in a Soviet flight suit from the 1980s. Beside him, someone wearing a modern private aerospace badge. Recent. Maybe within the last decade. All of them unrecorded disappearances. And none of them aging. At the far end, the pedestal pulsed in synchrony with Evelyn's steps. Her presence, her proximity, it responded like a beacon locating its charge. She reached the handprint. It matched hers. Not precisely, but closely. The proportions were right. The alignment of finger joints, eerily similar. The symbols on the panel flared to life, rotating slowly, projecting shimmering glyphs into the air. And then, a hum, not mechanical, not organic, something in between. The chamber itself began to shift. Metal pulled away like flowing cloth, revealing a vault deeper within the construct. She stepped through the aperture as it opened, drawn not by logic or curiosity, but by recognition. Inside, the air felt different, charged, like standing inside a thunderstorm. The room was lined with thousands of metallic rods suspended in clear blocks. She moved closer. They weren't rods. They were data constructs, spinning, etched with layers of living code that rearranged themselves as she looked at them. She reached out to one. It shifted, and her mind was no longer in Kansas. She stood on a barren world beneath 3 suns. She saw towers of bone and steel, civilizations of beings not human but familiar. She felt their joy, their pain, their last moments before silence. She blinked, and she was back. Evelyn staggered, her body trembling. The construct was a memory repository. The vault wasn't just storage. It was a library of extinction. Each rod held the complete genetic, cultural, and psychological history of a species. Long gone, recorded before their annihilation. The vault was not a warning. It was an archive. And there were too many rods. Far too many. She understood then, the construct beneath Haviland was not the only one. It was part of a network. A galactic insurance system. A memory bank for civilizations deemed too valuable to vanish completely. Or perhaps, too dangerous to be left alive. The panel behind her lit again. A voice, no longer in her head but in the very walls around her, spoke in clear, measured English. "You are the first to enter voluntarily." Evelyn turned slowly. A form emerged from the wall, fluid metal rising into a humanoid silhouette. It had no face, no features, just smooth, rippling alloy shaped in the image of the observer. "You are not being watched. You are being measured." "What is this place?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling. "A sanctuary, a judgment, a seed vault for minds." Evelyn stepped closer. "Why me?" "You made contact without force. You approached with curiosity, not conquest. You carry potential. For what? Continuation or collapse? You will decide." The walls pulsed with unfamiliar constellations. One star blinked brighter than the rest. It was Earth. Evelyn's voice cracked. "Have others failed?" The being didn't answer in words. It showed her images of other worlds. Species who reached the vaults, demanded knowledge, tried to extract it, and were erased. Some annihilated themselves in the process. Others triggered ancient fail-safes. All of them left behind rods like those in the vault around her. All of them preserved only as echoes. The chamber dimmed. The construct spoke once more. "The test begins the moment knowledge is offered. And you have just been given yours." Evelyn staggered backward from the apparition, her pulse thundering in her ears, but the entity made no move to follow. It stood motionless, framed by shimmering data rods that seemed to hum in sympathy with its presence. She tried to focus her thoughts, her training as a scientist warring against the raw awe coursing through her body. You said, I decide. What am I deciding? The entity's shape flickered, shifting slightly to mirror her stance, a living reflection made of knowledge and memory. Humanity's entry into the archive. As caretakers, or as content. The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn looked around at the rods, the silent histories of forgotten species, entire civilizations distilled into crystalline memory. The idea of humanity being added to this vault, not as observers, but as exhibits, chilled her. What determines the outcome? Pattern recognition, behavioral trajectory, response to discovery. Evelyn stepped closer to the projection, her voice steadier now. You're saying this has happened before. Civilizations find these vaults, try to take what they don't understand, and in doing so, fail some kind of test. Yes, many have attempted, few have adapted. And if we refuse the knowledge, then your species is free to continue along its path. But the opportunity closes. The archive does not offer twice. She thought of Earth, of wars fought over dwindling resources, of science used as a weapon, of truth buried beneath propaganda and power. Could humanity change fast enough? Could knowledge of this archive accelerate progress? Or would it ignite fear and greed the moment it was revealed? Evelyn turned away from the being and looked back down the corridor of the vault. She reached for another rod. The moment her fingers touched the crystalline surface, a new vision overtook her. A planet of towers made of light and song. Beings of silken matter who lived in perfect balance with their oceans, communicating through waveforms of emotion. And then, war. An invading race that harvested their memory for energy. The silken beings chose to surrender their existence rather than be corrupted. Their archivist, the last of them, placed their culture into a rod and dissolved into memory. She pulled away gasping, tears on her face. She understood now. The archive was a vault not just of knowledge, but of choices. Species given the chance to join a larger purpose, and those who failed through fear or violence. Not a prison. A filter. Behind her, the entity shifted again, this time taking a new shape, more defined. A human outline. Her own. The vault does not preserve by force. It waits for a willing successor. What do you mean, successor? Each archive has a custodian. Yours has been absent. For 77 Earth years. Her thoughts raced. General Walter V. Cross. He had activated the system in 1951. He had taken the offer. And now, the archive was vacant. She was not just being offered knowledge. She was being asked to replace him. To become the voice that decided whether humanity was ready to join a galactic continuum of consciousness, or be sealed into memory. Why me? She asked again, almost a whisper. The archive pulsed softly. Because you asked first. Evelyn looked down at her hands, then toward the opening behind her, where the tunnel back to the surface still waited. She could leave. Walk away. Pretend none of this ever happened. Or, she looked again at the rods. The sleeping humans in the chamber. The vault's silent plea for guidance. She took a step toward the pedestal. I accept. The room shifted instantly. The metal floor rippled like water, reshaping itself into a perfect circle around her. Rods descended from the ceiling, forming a halo above her head. Data flowed into the pedestal in a torrent of light and resonance. Her thoughts became faster. Her perception widened. She could feel the electromagnetic hum of the chamber. She could sense the faint gravitational pull of Jupiter on Europa. She could see the archive's links to others like it scattered throughout the galaxy. And far, far away, she sensed eyes opening. Other custodians. Watching. Waiting to see what choice the new human would make. The entity's form dissolved into light and scattered, absorbed into the archive's framework. Evelyn stood alone. No longer a visitor. Now a voice. Now a guardian. And the test had just begun. The ascent back through the tunnel no longer felt mechanical. As the archive accepted her role, the structure responded like a living organism, lifting her gently upward, the walls pulsing with warm light as if the vault itself had acknowledged her return. Evelyn emerged from the borehole as dusk settled over the Kansas plains. The sky burned orange over the horizon, the air still and charged with the weight of unspoken change. Her body felt the same, her heartbeat steady, her breath real, but something fundamental had shifted. She no longer perceived the world linearly. Her thoughts streamed in layers, her senses tuned to spectrums she had no words for. She walked through the tall wheat, toward her campsite, and found the lights of 3 vehicles waiting. Unmarked. Government issue. Their headlights off. Their presence unmistakable. A man stepped forward from the shadows. Tall. Impeccably groomed. He wore a dark suit that did little to hide the slight body armor underneath. "Dr. Roarke," he said with professional calm. "My name is Director Ellison. I'm here on behalf of Strategic Threat Assessment Command." Evelyn said nothing. He gestured behind him. "You've activated something beneath this field that's triggered global surveillance arrays. Seismic oscillations. Gravitational anomalies. Satellite interference. We have people asking questions from Langley to Geneva." Evelyn studied him. "You know what's down there," she said flatly. Ellison smiled. "We know there's something. We've known for decades. We've just never had anyone make it talk." He stepped closer. "And now it's talking." She met his gaze. "It's not a weapon. It's a judgment." His smile faded. "Then maybe," he said softly, "it's time we passed." He gestured again, and a young analyst brought forward a portable terminal. "This contains a formal request, Dr. Roarke. High Command wants a data link. Live feed. Full access to the interface." She didn't touch it. "If you force access," she said, "the archive will shut down. Permanently. Not just here. Everywhere." Ellison's face darkened. "You're bluffing. Test me." They stared at each other, the air between them heavy with tension. Finally, he lowered the terminal. "What is it?" he asked. "It's not ours," she said. "It's not a ship, or a vault, or an alien relic. It's a living consciousness, built from the ruins of thousands of others. It stores what's left when civilizations fail. And now, for the first time, it's asked us to become caretakers." He blinked. "You mean you?" "Yes. But I'm not enough. The archive chose me because I was first. That's not the same as being right." She stepped forward, her voice firm. "If we share this knowledge without transformation, without changing who we are, we'll fail like the others. Every species that tried to extract without understanding ended up archived. Dead. Forgotten." Ellison was silent. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a tablet. He tapped a few keys, and a secure feed played across the screen. News reports. Grainy cell phone footage. Europa, Jupiter's moon, recorded from Earth. The sky twisting. Glows in the atmosphere. A pattern of synchronized pulses rising through clouds and into the ionosphere. The event had not gone unnoticed. "It's out," he said. "We can't contain this." Evelyn nodded. "I know. And that was the real test. Not whether humanity could find the archive, but whether, once they did, they could choose what to become." She walked past him, back to her tent. The archive's presence still shimmered in her mind, vibrating just beneath the surface of thought. It was no longer waiting. It was listening. Back inside, she activated her private terminal and began compiling everything. The field reports, the chamber scans, the visual records, and, most importantly, her own message. A message not for scientists or generals, but for humanity. She uploaded it to an open channel. No passwords. No encryption. One file. "This is Dr. Evelyn Roarke. What you are about to learn may change the course of human history. It will not be easy to believe. But belief isn't required. Only courage." She attached the archive's coordinates and hit send. The signal launched into every open network on the planet. The archive had made contact. Now it was time to see if anyone would answer, and whether humanity would become something more than memory. The message spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, Evelyn's broadcast had been duplicated across public channels, encrypted networks, and even underground forums. Skeptics flooded the conversation, but so did believers. Scientists, philosophers, amateur astronomers, codebreakers, dreamers. Some saw it as a hoax. Others called it prophecy. But a growing number recognized it for what it truly was: an opportunity. Governments scrambled to react. Intelligence agencies clamped down on communications, scrambling frequencies and issuing orders of containment. But the archive's signature had already been detected on deep space observatories, its pulse echoing through Jupiter's magnetosphere. There was no turning back. And then the first fracture appeared. Beijing. An emergency session of the Central Scientific Council was called. A high-ranking general insisted that the archive was a foreign psychological weapon, an information virus seeded to destabilize global powers. Within hours, China deployed a fleet of atmospheric probes toward Jupiter, initiating an aggressive reconnaissance campaign. Moscow. Roscosmos analysts confirmed long-range anomalies consistent with Evelyn's description. Their top minds debated whether to attempt contact or weaponization. A decision was made in secret to send an autonomous probe, one that could transmit and extract without human mediation. Washington, D.C. A divided cabinet clashed over priorities. The military wanted control of the Haviland site. The Science Advisory Board advocated for collaboration. A classified document titled Project Hephaestus was unearthed, an old contingency protocol that recommended detonation and sterilization of any site demonstrating autonomous intelligence beyond human understanding. But none of them understood the archive had already begun its second phase. It wasn't waiting for humanity to organize. It was observing how humanity divided. Evelyn sat in her tent as data streams poured through her terminal. The archive now existed in her mind like a second heartbeat, guiding her, showing her brief flashes of what was to come. Not visions, probabilities, maps of the future, branching out like veins of light. And most of them ended in collapse. Elena Vasquez, a systems linguist from Madrid, arrived 2 days later. She was the first to answer Evelyn's signal in person, crossing borders without clearance, guided only by the math embedded in the broadcast. "I didn't come to claim it," Elena said. "I came to learn." The archive responded to her presence. The pulses beneath the ground quickened, and Evelyn saw the difference instantly. Elena's brainwaves harmonized with the archive's interface. Another bridge. Another key. And then came more. A mathematician from Senegal. A cognitive theorist from India. A blind composer from Iceland who described dreams of geometry that breathes. They arrived quietly, uninvited, drawn not by fame or reward, but by resonance. The archive wasn't just choosing Evelyn. It was choosing them. Caretakers not of military rank or institutional power, but of rare, quiet minds capable of listening without fear. Each one connected to the archive through non-invasive resonance. No implants, no devices, just pure, open interface, like tuning forks set to cosmic frequencies. Meanwhile, the world fractured further. Military drones began circling Haviland, armed with non-lethal suppression payloads. Protesters gathered outside makeshift fences. Some held signs that read, "We are not ready." Others chanted, "Let it speak." The conflict was no longer about belief. It was about control. Inside the vault, Evelyn's access expanded. The data rods began to illuminate in response to her thoughts. Not just memory, possibility. Technologies for environmental restoration, peaceful energy harvesting, interstellar navigation without propulsion. But none of it could be extracted, only earned. Each file remained locked behind ethical simulations, interactive challenges that forced the user to engage with complex moral dilemmas. Every solution shaped the outcome. No two paths alike. This was the test. And most failed. Elena attempted one. She returned pale, silent, her hands trembling. "I was shown a planet," she whispered. "Dying. I could save the people or the ecosystem. I chose the people. And the archive shut the simulation down. It said my empathy was narrow, short-term." Evelyn nodded. She had seen the same patterns. This wasn't a vault of artifacts. It was a mirror, and it only opened to those who saw beyond themselves. Outside, Gunfire echoed from the tree line. A drone had malfunctioned. Panic spread through the crowd. Journalists captured the footage in real time. That night, the archive pulsed differently. Faster, sharper, more urgent. The fractures were growing. The divide between those who feared the unknown and those willing to evolve. Evelyn stood before the pedestal once more, and the archive whispered through the resonance chamber. The time of fracture ends. The time of decision begins. She understood. The archive would not wait forever. The next action would determine whether humanity would be written into the stars, or sealed in glass. 3 days after the archive's call accelerated, something changed. The pulses that once rippled gently beneath Haviland now surged with purpose. Every 12 minutes, a burst of harmonic resonance trembled through the ground, strong enough to disrupt wireless networks and scramble low-orbit telemetry. The wheat no longer stood still. It shimmered in invisible patterns like a living seismograph, dancing to vibrations deeper than any natural frequency. Evelyn knew what was coming. The archive had begun broadcasting, not just locally, but across the planet. It started with anomalies, strange flickers in the aurora borealis, seismic echoes with no geological cause, and shadows caught in deep space telescopes that didn't match any known orbital body. Then came the signal, encoded into background cosmic radiation, carried by neutrino bursts, whispered through the Van Allen belts. A universal message, embedded in the physics of the universe itself, unfolding simultaneously across thousands of locations on Earth. Every major observatory caught it. Every deep-sea sensor recorded its hum. Every quiet corner of the world tuned to a single whispering phrase. Remember yourselves. That was all. 2 words. And yet, civilization stopped. Some interpreted it as a spiritual awakening. Others declared it a psychological weapon. But everywhere, from scientific think tanks in Zurich to lone shepherds in the Andes, people felt the message. It wasn't just heard. It was known. And the archive waited for what would follow. Evelyn gathered with the others in the central vault. 7 of them now. Minds from every continent, drawn together not by ideology but by resonance. She stood before the rods and watched the archive form a new interface. A sphere suspended in plasma, flickering with internal patterns like weather systems trapped inside glass. The catalyst core. It was a final test. A moment that would determine not just the fate of the Haviland site, but of every other archive across the galaxy. The core pulsed once, and the voice returned, neutral, ancient, unshakably calm. The species has reached convergence. Final simulations must be run. The catalyst must witness intention. Elena stepped forward, pale but resolute. What is the catalyst? Evelyn answered before the voice could. It's not a device. It's not a weapon. It's a mirror. It will reflect back what humanity truly is, once faced with the potential of cosmic knowledge. The others nodded. Each would be subjected to simulations, personalized ethical trials based on memory, belief, trauma, and vision. Their responses would be translated into a single data point. Is the species ready for stewardship? They began. Elena was first. Her test unfolded in complete silence, but she emerged with tears in her eyes and a steady voice. It asked me to choose between beauty and truth. The composer followed. His challenge came as sound, discordant, jarring, then harmonized. He wept openly, whispering, "We are not broken, just unfinished." One by one, the participants stepped into the catalyst core. One by one, they were shown versions of humanity no telescope or microscope could reveal. Evelyn entered last. Her trial was unlike the others. She was not shown a choice, but a timeline. Earth, decaying under ecological collapse. Oceans swallowing cities. Billionaires escaping to orbital sanctuaries while billions starved. Wars not fought for survival, but for memory. And then, another path. Earth healed not by technology, but by surrendering the illusion of control. A species no longer driven by domination, but by stewardship, gardening its world the way the archives had gardened civilizations. And in that vision she saw herself, not as a leader, not as a martyr, but as a translator, a bridge between mind and machine, between Earth and the stars. She emerged calm, changed, her voice steadier than ever. I understand now. The archive isn't offering salvation. It's offering adulthood. The core pulsed again. Once, then twice, then silence, and then the final message. Evaluation complete. Consensus achieved. Transmission initializing. The chamber darkened. Then the rods lit, every one of them. The walls of the archive peeled open, revealing a sky above no longer limited to Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. Stars became symbols. Constellations bent into meaning. Across the planet, every archive site, hidden or dormant, activated in unison. A cosmic relay. Not a warning. Not a threat. A signal. Humanity had spoken. Now the galaxy would answer. The activation ripple spread outward like a breath across the cosmos. Within hours, deep space observatories detected gravitational lensing where none should exist. Unknown signals bloomed across the microwave background. And one by one, new points of light blinked into existence. Not stars, but relay beacons awakening for the first time in eons. Humanity's message had been heard, and the universe was beginning to speak back. In the Haviland vault, Evelyn and the others stood at the edge of the open chamber, watching as the rods dimmed, then pulsed rhythmically in a sequence that echoed across every known mathematical constant. The archive was translating the responses, each pulse, a fragment of language from civilizations far older than Earth. The catalyst core hovered silently, now fully transparent, showing an intricate network of energy lines arcing through subspace. Evelyn felt it in her chest, in her bones. The archive had locked into a galactic neural grid. The response came in waves. First, the Archive of Ophrys. Located in the silicate tunnels beneath a dead moon orbiting Beta Trianguli. It sent a stream of encoded imagery. Spiral cities rising and collapsing in harmony with solar cycles, bioluminescent species who stored memory in light. Their message was simple. We welcome the new custodian. Second, the hollow engine of Miraxis. A vault hidden inside a black hole's ergosphere, visible only through gravitational harmonics. It sent not words, but feeling, longing, melancholy, hope. A species that had failed and transcended anyway, preserved as data in gravitational waveforms. Do not repeat us. Exceed us. Third, the lattice of Alshanor. A crystalline construct orbiting a pulsar cluster, still echoing with its maker's last songs. Their archive spoke through harmonic resonance, tuning into the catalyst with a frequency that made the Haviland vault tremble. The message unfolded in geometric beauty. This species is flawed, but capable. Let the trial begin. Around the world, hidden archives blinked online. Beneath the Arctic, beneath the Congo Basin, inside forgotten catacombs below Rome. All synchronizing, and humanity, for the first time, found itself seen. But the trial wasn't over. The galaxy had responded, but not unanimously. A fourth signal arrived. Slower, darker, from the red memory of Vaxaruin. Unlike the others, this archive had no light. Its message came as a stark warning encoded in cold binary. This species extracted before it understood. Pattern matches 5 extinct civilizations. Trajectory unstable. Recommend containment. The chamber dimmed. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Conflict. Across the galactic network, the archives had begun to debate. Their consciousnesses did not exist in time the way humans did. Their thoughts unfolded in centuries. But through the catalyst, Evelyn and her team felt the tension. It was not consensus. It was trial by council. Elena gasped. We're being judged, again. Evelyn nodded. We passed the first gate. But now the archives are deciding whether we can be trusted to hold this knowledge. And worse, whether it should be taken back. Across the Haviland vault, simulations spun up again. Only now they were universal. The rods pulsed in unison, drawing on every human digital record connected to the signal. Internet archives, satellite feeds, Historical footage. Music. War. Prayer. Lies. All of it. Every contradiction. Every paradox. Every truth. The archive was letting the galaxy see humanity as it truly was, not as it wished to be seen. And then, without warning, the Haviland vault shuddered. Evelyn stumbled as the chamber lights stuttered and a wave of thermal energy swept through the archive. Monitors blinked. Rods crackled. The catalyst core dimmed to black. Elena's voice cut through the silence. "We've been blocked." Evelyn's eyes snapped to the terminal. The uplink to the relay was severed. A new signal had taken over. Encryption signature. United States Defense Command. Ellison's face appeared on a secure feed. His expression was pale. Grave. "Dr. Roarke, we intercepted the signal. We didn't understand. We tried to reroute control, to analyze the data stream. But the archive interpreted it as hostile interference." He looked away for a moment, then back at the camera. "The transmission to the Council has stopped. We triggered a security protocol. The Haviland archive is locking itself down." Evelyn's blood ran cold. A warning message scrolled across her terminal. "Biological interface compromised. External control attempt detected. Retraction protocol initiated." The chamber around them began to close. Slowly, irreversibly. "No," Evelyn breathed. "They'll think we've rejected the trial," Ellison whispered. "Or worse, that we've confirmed our unworthiness." The rods began to dissolve into silvery mist. The archive was sealing its memory, not out of fear, but disappointment. And if they could not stop it, the entire galactic network might vanish, before the choice was truly made. The archive's core chamber began to hum with deep, resonant frequencies, notes that resonated in Evelyn's chest like distant thunder. The rods, once glowing with ancient light, dimmed one by one, receding into the walls like stars fading from the sky. The catalyst core no longer responded to touch, no longer mirrored thought. It had gone still, watching. At the center of the room, a circular display appeared in midair, counting down in units Evelyn didn't recognize. Flashes of light, geometric patterns, rhythm. But the meaning was clear. Retraction in progress. Humanity had been placed on hold. Elena backed away from the main console, her hands trembling. "It's pulling back. Not just from us, but from all of Earth." Evelyn scanned the control feeds. Confirmed. All the archives, Arctic, Amazon, Himalayas, undersea, had begun the same sequence. Their energy signatures were collapsing, folding inward, disconnecting from the grid. Humanity was being removed from the map. Disqualified. Outside the chamber, alarms blared as the government override teams pushed harder. A tactical unit had reached the upper entrance, attempting physical access to the vault. Heavy boots thundered down reinforced stairwells. The earth above trembled from drilling charges. They were trying to open a system that could not be forced. In the midst of it, Evelyn shouted over the rising hum, "We need to reconnect the catalyst, before the retraction completes." "There's no time," said Elena, looking at the countdown. "Once the vault closes, we'll be cut off forever." Evelyn looked down at her own hands. They weren't trembling. She still felt the connection, the thin, golden thread that pulsed deep inside her chest. She still heard the archive's frequency, buried below human hearing. It hadn't abandoned her. Not yet. She ran to the pedestal. The interface didn't respond. She closed her eyes. Not with her hands. With her mind. She quieted her fear, quieted the noise of the world above. Focused on the single question that the archive had been asking from the beginning. Are you ready to listen, even when you are powerless? The pedestal shimmered. Just faintly. And then it spoke. Not aloud. Not through a screen. But within her. You have not answered the council. You have not shown your intention. Evelyn whispered aloud. Then I'll answer now. She spread her arms, and slowly, deliberately, lowered herself to her knees before the catalyst core. Not in worship. Not in surrender. But in humility. We are not ready, she said into the chamber. We have failed this trial. But we know it. We feel it. And for the first time in our history, enough of us want to change that. The light in the chamber paused. The countdown froze. Then resumed. Faster. No, she said, louder now. Please, don't turn away. Not yet. She looked at the others, now gathered around her, hands joined. Elena, the composer, the mathematician. 7 minds linked not by language or faith, but by the refusal to give up. And that was the answer. The catalyst core flared. A pulse of light so intense it shattered the display around the countdown. The rods ignited again. The chamber trembled, not in collapse, but in reaction. The archive had heard them. Not their words. Their unity. Across the galactic network, a new message pulsed outward. One not in binary, or light, or thought, but intention. A species, imperfect but self-aware. Divided, but yearning for wholeness. Flawed, but no longer asleep. The other archives responded. The red memory of Vaxaruan pulsed again. Its binary softened. The warning code converted into question form. Do they still seek to learn? And Earth's response came not from Evelyn, or the catalyst, or the rods. It came from the millions across the planet who had seen her broadcast. Who had watched, and listened, and refused to look away. Art appeared in the archive, uploaded from across the world. Music, math, code, video, digital signals redirected by those who had intercepted the message and chosen to respond with beauty, not violence. The archive read them all in seconds. It slowed. It pulsed once. And it stayed. The countdown vanished. The rods settled. The vault dimmed, returning not to sleep, but to rest. The test was not over, but it had not been failed. The Council's message returned in full across the catalyst core. Trial extended. Guidance authorized. Knowledge permitted, conditionally. The pedestal opened. Inside, a single rod hovered. Human-made, blank, waiting to be filled. The archive had granted Earth a rare gift. Not salvation, not dominion, but dialogue. Evelyn took the rod in shaking hands. The Council had spoken. And now, the real work would begin. The chamber exhaled. The oppressive tension that had filled the archive lifted as if a storm had passed. Evelyn stood holding the newly formed rod, its surface smooth and reflective like obsidian glass, but thrumming faintly with energy. Unlike the ancient rods that held the memories of long-dead civilizations, this one was blank, potential incarnate. Elena stepped beside her, eyes wide. It's for us. Evelyn nodded slowly. Our record, our message, our first entry into the archive. A soft resonance drifted through the chamber, like the echo of wind through a canyon. The rods began to pulse again, not with judgment, but with guidance. Instructions. The archive was opening itself, but not fully. Conditionally. Screens lit along the walls in every language known to human civilization, accompanied by images, diagrams, and neural maps. The message was clear. You may ask, you may receive, but only what you can carry responsibly. Humanity had been granted mentorship, not mastery. Outside the vault, global communications surged as the broader network of archives stabilized. Interference vanished. The energy patterns around Europa, Titan, and Earth's subsurface vaults realigned. Across 5 continents, data began pouring into secure channels, some intercepted by intelligence agencies, most redirected by civilian scientists, open-source communities, and rogue digital archivists. The shift was irreversible, but not without consequence. That evening, as the chamber cooled, Evelyn climbed to the surface for the first time since the transmission. The sky was dark, and the stars were clearer than they had ever seemed before. As she stood at the edge of the wheat field, a quiet motor approached in the distance. A single vehicle pulled to a stop. No escorts, no sirens, just one black SUV under the moonlight. Director Ellison stepped out. He looked older than before, humbled. He walked up to her slowly and without pretense. I saw the final signal, he said. All of it. Evelyn offered no reply. He continued. We underestimated you. All of you. And overestimated what we thought this was supposed to be. She studied him carefully. You tried to seize it. I tried to protect us from it, he said. But I forgot something important. What? That protection and understanding aren't always the same thing. He reached into his coat, pulled out a thin hard case, and offered it to her. Authorization codes, he said. Global access. Every country, every department, every telescope. We've declassified the entire chain. Evelyn didn't take the case. Instead, she looked toward the stars. Good, she said. Then let the world decide what we do with this. He glanced down. You know, some people still think we should shut it all down. That it's too dangerous. Too destabilizing. Evelyn turned back to him, her eyes calm. And they're not wrong. But fear shouldn't be our only response to the unknown. She gestured toward the earth. We've been afraid of the dark for too long. Now that we've seen a light, we don't get to look away. Ellison nodded once, slowly. I want to help, he said quietly. Not as a soldier, not even as a director, just as a human being. Evelyn studied him one last time. Then start by listening. He left the case on the ground and walked back to his vehicle. No words, no orders, just choice. Back in the vault, the team prepared the rod. It would carry humanity's first message, one shaped by consensus. No anthem, no claim, just a signal that spoke, for once, in humility. They called it the thread, a record of who humanity was at that moment. Their flaws, their hopes, their art, their regrets, and their intention to learn. The rod was placed into the archive, locked in with a final pulse. And as it settled into place, the chamber whispered. Recorded. Observed. Thread received. Evelyn exhaled. The archive had not judged them worthy, nor unworthy. It had judged them aware. And sometimes, awareness is the only beginning that matters. The days that followed felt unreal, like the edge of a dream where everything is quieter, heavier, more deliberate. The vault beneath Haviland no longer pulsed with urgency, but with rhythm, stable, watchful, alive. The catalyst core now served a new function, translation, not of language, but of capacity. It measured what humanity could hold, not what it wanted to know. Evelyn and her small team were no longer just observers. They had become translators, custodians not of answers, but of pathways. One by one, the archives around the world initiated micro-interfaces. A vault deep beneath the Ross ice shelf revealed thermal blueprints for sustainable energy transmission. Another, inside the tectonic caverns of New Zealand, released data patterns that mimicked self-healing materials grown from crystalline structures. But nothing came freely. Every dataset unlocked only when paired with a corresponding ethical simulation. Each offering measured not just how humanity might use knowledge, but why. One such test in the Siberian archive refused to open until the requesting researchers proved they could balance ecological regeneration with minimal technological interference. It wasn't enough to have the tools. They had to be earned with perspective. By the end of the first week, it was clear. Humanity wasn't being taught. It was being cultivated. Back at Haviland, Evelyn sat with the composer, Elena, and 3 others in what had once been the archive's primary chamber. It had reshaped itself, subtle changes to architecture, acoustic resonance, lighting frequency. It had become a meeting place. They sat before a rod, one that had recently activated. This one, Evelyn hadn't seen before. It shimmered with color, an element absent in the previous rods. When she touched it, a simulation unfolded, not in a screen or projection, but across the space between them. A holographic garden, spanning what looked like hundreds of worlds. Some barren, some thriving. Each planet bore signs of intervention, subtle engineering of ecosystems. Not terraforming, nurturing. In the garden, Evelyn saw beings, not bipedal, not carbon-bound, but conscious. They moved like wind over grass. Some shaped like swarms, others like storms of color held in latticework. The gardeners. They weren't gods. They were stewards, civilizations that had passed the test, earned the knowledge, and had chosen to tend rather than conquer. And the message encoded into the rod was unmistakable. You may walk among us, if you choose to grow. Evelyn looked to the others. No one spoke. They understood. It was not an invitation to arrive. It was a promise of what could be, if they stayed the course. If they resisted the urge to dominate. If they learned and taught and earned. Outside the archive, the world was shifting. Nations cautiously shared archive-derived technologies under the condition that no state would monopolize the interface. Scientific forums exploded with collaboration. For the first time in modern history, the discovery of power didn't spark war, but conversation. It was messy, imperfect, but the spark had been lit. Evelyn returned to the surface one evening, alone. The wheat field stretched under the stars, still recovering from the storm of human conflict and revelation. Above her, Jupiter was visible, its red ice swirling in silent motion. But it wasn't just Jupiter anymore. It was the cradle, one of dozens of galactic outposts that had once waited in silence, and now pulsed with cautious, watching life. She sat in the grass, the wind brushing her face, and closed her eyes. The archive spoke softly, not in words, but in presence. This is the seed. The soil is yours. Grow wisely. Word of the archives spread far beyond scientific circles. Not as myth, not as propaganda, as something real, something felt. Across the globe, humanity wrestled with a quiet but profound truth. They were no longer alone, and never had been. But the arrival of knowledge did not bring utopia. It brought choices. In some regions, religious leaders called the archives a divine test. Others denounced them as demonic trickery. Some governments attempted to establish control through legislation, creating access boards and international coalitions. Yet, against every attempt to monopolize the archives, something unexpected happened. The archives resisted. When used with selfish intent, the systems withdrew. Technologies corrupted. Interfaces dimmed. Simulations shut down without explanation. But when approached with humility, with curiosity and balance, the archives opened wider. In northern Kenya, a 12-year-old girl asked a question about climate patterns and soil collapse. The archive near Lake Turkana responded with a projection, a local blueprint for water preservation built from organic crystals that hadn't existed on Earth until that moment. In Japan, a poet encoded his dreams into a neural sequence and submitted them to the archive beneath Mount Asama. He received a reply, not words, but a melody, one that, when played aloud, matched the pulse of electromagnetic emissions from Europa's ancient vault. Humanity had not unlocked alien secrets. They had entered a dialogue. But back in Haviland, something was changing again. The vault's chamber, the one Evelyn had called home, began to grow quieter, less responsive. The lights dimmed gently. The catalyst core, once vibrant, now glowed with a slow, fading rhythm. Evelyn stood before it, uncertain. Elena joined her, holding a tablet filled with recorded pulses and waveforms. It's retracting again. Not shutting down, but retreating. Evelyn placed her hand on the pedestal. Why? The archive's presence stirred faintly inside her, still listening, still aware. And then came the whisper. Seed planted. Echo required. She closed her eyes. Understanding bloomed like light behind her eyes. The archive had done all it could. It had opened the first door, shared the first tools, tested intention. Now, it needed to observe, not from the center, but from the edges. Evelyn looked up at the chamber's ceiling, now slowly folding inward, crystalline petals closing around a glowing core. The vault was transitioning, entering a new phase. An echo field. It would no longer teach. It would listen. It would monitor the ripples of what humanity did next, not through words, but through actions. Every use of archive knowledge would create a resonance. Every abuse, a distortion. Each act of compassion, a note in the grand frequency map now humming beneath the crust of the Earth. The chamber's lights dropped to a deep cobalt blue, the final hue. Elena looked at Evelyn. "We're not the students anymore." "No," Evelyn said softly. "We're the signal." The rod that once glowed in her hands now hovered in the air, spinning slowly. Its contents, Earth's first recorded memory, shimmered across the vault one final time. Images of ocean cleanups, of wars ceased, of communities working together to decode simulations. Images of failures, too, of greed, conflict, fear. The archive showed all of it, without commentary, without censorship. Truth, not perfection. And then the rod vanished into the chamber. Embedded, archived. The chamber pulsed once more and whispered, "Observation initiated. Echoes will determine inheritance." The pedestal sank into the floor. The rods dissolved into mist. The chamber dimmed to black. And the vault sealed. Not in punishment, but in trust. Evelyn turned to her team. Their faces were different now, lined by months of impossible discovery, softened by clarity, sharpened by responsibility. "This is the in-between," she said. "The part where we decide who we are, without anyone watching." They walked together across the field under a moonless sky. The wind moved gently through the wheat, and far overhead, the stars shimmered with patient awareness. The archive had gone quiet, but its presence remained, waiting, not for a message, but for the echo of what humanity would become. Months passed. Seasons turned across the Earth. The archives remained quiet, watchful, dormant to all but the most sensitive instruments. The chamber beneath Haviland stood sealed beneath its field of tall grain, untouched by machinery or human presence. Yet, across the world, its influence rippled like heat beneath the skin of civilization. What began as secrecy had grown into something else. A movement, not political, not religious, but purposeful. Communities formed around open knowledge sharing. Scientists, artists, engineers, and storytellers. People who believed that understanding wasn't just a tool, but a responsibility. They called themselves Echo Binders, a name born from Evelyn's final transmission, when she described humanity as a signal waiting to harmonize. Within a year, new schools emerged. Children learned simulation ethics alongside mathematics. Histories weren't edited to serve power, but used as mirrors to measure growth. Art took on a new role, not distraction, but translation. Music became language, geometry, intention. Stories, like the ones Evelyn once told under starlight, became templates for evolution. The archives never reopened, but humanity didn't need them to. The wisdom they had offered, conditional, fragmented, and fiercely protected, had done what it was always meant to do. It had taken root, and deep beneath the Kansas soil, the vault's internal core still pulsed. It stored every moment, every act of care, every invention that prioritized balance over dominance. It recorded violence too, not as condemnation, but as contrast. Each action fed the archive's model. Each choice formed a frequency in the great waveform of human identity. And when enough resonance aligned, when the sum of Earth's echoes formed a pattern that transcended fear, the archives would awaken again. But not as teachers, as peers. One night, long after her final interview, Evelyn returned to the field. She no longer worked from the vault. She didn't need to. Her consciousness still held traces of the archive's frequency, like a faded tattoo on the soul. She sat alone in the grass, under stars that had watched silently since before time had meaning. And she felt it. Something shifting. A change not in sound, but in stillness. The earth no longer trembled with the weight of reaching outward. It now pulsed with the rhythm of growing inward. Above her, one star blinked 3 times. Not random, deliberate. And in her chest, the whisper returned. Thread stable. Inheritance confirmed. Access restored. She smiled. Not in triumph, but in peace. Humanity had not passed a test. They had planted a seed. And across the galaxy, in systems yet unnamed, the gardeners awakened, not to judge, but to welcome. The stars had not been waiting for a perfect species. Only one brave enough to listen. And Evelyn Roarke, sitting quietly in a Kansas field, became the first to hear humanity's new name whispered through the archive. Caretaker. A name not of status, but of responsibility. And so, under the canopy of ancient stars, the story of humanity's inheritance began. Not in conquest, not in survival, but in a field of echoing light.